It's very interesting that we can not feel connected to the seriousness of what's happening. I think it's because we aren't actually connected to the land and to our surroundings in any meaningful way.
I consume way more than I give back, and that's been so heartbreaking for me to realize, because I've just been closing my eyes and not wanting to pay attention.
They have to realize that this is something they're going to be confronted with, whether they like it or not.
What does the church have to say or offer in the age of climate change? And can it be useful to our children and to their future? The Orthodox Fellowship of the Transfiguration has undertaken an ambitious journey with this film, a journey to the heart of the church and before the face of God, so that we can answer an important question. What can the church do to address the climate crisis?
The church knows. The church has a lot to say, and they can't sit back and just say it's not our problem.
Tremendous disconnect between the message in our theology and the practice of our faith.
You know, it's not just the Orthodox who are endangered, the world is in danger.
But we're trying to raise just simply the awareness that this issue is something that's threaded right throughout our Orthodox history, our Orthodox theology, our understanding of creation, our understanding of redemption. We have generations that, God willing, are going to come after us, and we want to leave them a legacy. We don't want to leave them in devastation.
We've seen the end of the concept that there's an endless earth. Even when I was growing up, I'm 53, and when I was growing up, I still had this sense that over the mountains there was undiscovered land, that there was a place that I could go where no one had ever gone. I don't think any of us believe that anymore. And, you know, that's the hard thing to face, actually. The sad truth is you can go to the farthest reaches of what we would think of as the wilderness, and you'll find the fingerprint of humans there. And that's why we have what scientists call the Anthropocene. The human fingerprint is now in the farthest reaches of our planet. You can go to pristine places in the Arctic and find cooler chewed by polar bears. There isn't anywhere else for us to go.
Some people would say that the earth is always changing, that these sort of things happen all the time, that our life on earth is not really having any impact on the climate systems.
On this particular chart, it shows CO2 rising from about 335 parts per million to today, it's at 412. There's no disputing this. You can see a marked rise in how CO2 is climbing. What's important is that there is a direct correlation between CO2 levels and temperature. So all of these things are connected. We're right now experiencing a number of things that are easily documented. Here, we see how the Arctic is experiencing what the scientists call freakishly warm weather. This would be funny if it wasn't so serious. This is the new reality. So if we want to anticipate the future, we can't look to the past.
When I was a young kid, we were taught the temperature of the Earth will never change by more than 1 degree in any location anywhere. And how many degrees have we seen it change just in the last 5 years? I mean, you know, it's multiple degrees, and that already should be a severe warning to us. We're in a rather dire situation. I mean, the ocean ice is melting, the water levels are rising. We're creating new environments that didn't exist before. When you change an environment quickly, there's not enough time for a species to react. So then it gets lost because it couldn't adapt fast enough. We've lost more species in the past 10 years than we have in the previous several thousand years, all combined.
We're facing levels of disruption that, quite frankly, people can't imagine, and that's another reason it's problematic, is because we can't actually really imagine the level, the events, the magnitude of the events that we will see. It's just not in our imaginations. We're used to a sort of a cap on the worst case scenarios. As bad as we can imagine is nothing like as bad as it will get.
There's so much pollution that's going to come off that into the river.
Mm-hmm. What we said was going to happen 45 years ago is happening finally. You know, we knew it would, and it is now happening, and things are going beyond the point of no return, where things are going to just get worse and worse and worse and stay that way forever.
Our society, American society, and the way in which we're developing as a planet is, and it's well argued and documented by social scientists, is founded on income inequalities. These income inequalities give way to high rates of poverty within our own nation, and people that live and have to accommodate that poverty, which includes bearing the brunt of the pollution that wealthier people create.
In the US, when we started realizing that we're poisoning ourselves, we just kind of stopped, close things down, and go poison somebody else. As soon as you start trying to clean it up and make it safer, it costs more money. You know, the story around the coal mines in Pennsylvania, and they all knew this, that, you know, the mine owners worried more about the mules down in the mine because they cost money. If they died, we had to go buy a new one. If a miner died, there's always another one that will take the job. We're all going to pay to take care of these people that have been harmed by an industry that doesn't care, an industry that we've helped. It's just so frustrating that so many people don't see it. It's not obvious, and I have talked to other members, and some will shake their head and say, until they're in a disaster themselves.
The fires are stronger and hotter and faster now.
What made this fire different? Why was this fire, why did you associate this fire with climate change? You've lived here, you said, since you were 3 years old. What kind of changes in weather patterns have you seen?
I check the air quality monitor almost every day throughout August, September, and October now. And there are days when it's unhealthy for my daughter to go outside. It could actually hurt her. And that didn't used to happen. The wildfires, they create their own weather patterns now. I mean, there's just at least a month, it seems like, last summer, this summer, the summer before, there's about a month where you look outside and it's just like you're living in smog. I mean, the sky is brown. Sometimes it rains ash. So we were just getting news that everything was on fire, and it was so disorienting because there have always been fires in Northern California, but they don't come into the cities. They're wildfires, you know? So you have this sense that, yes, there are fires and they're part of our natural ecosystem, but they're contained. They stay in the forests. They're forest fires. Trader Joe's burned down, Kohl's burned down, the hospital was on fire.
The hospital was on fire?
The hospital. So this was plastic that was just being incinerated and going into the air. And I've never seen smoke like this. This is not what wildfire smoke looks like. I mean, the whole sky was black. And then the sun came up. Sorry. The sun was just red through the smoke. And it just felt like looking at a dying world. And I think that's kind of the urgency of climate change, is that nothing else matters if you can't drink the water and you can't breathe the air.
Sometimes I'm invited to speak to children about climate change, and it's very, very difficult to know how to talk to them about it. It made me wonder why we talk to adults so aggressively about catastrophe as well. If it's this hard if I can't talk to children and talk to them in stark terms about the fears that we have about what might happen, then why do we assume that adults can handle it like that? And actually, I don't think they can. I don't think any of us can really handle what we're talking about.
There are things we can do about it now to at least, if nothing else, slow down the process. But we're not doing it because a good much of our world, and certainly our politicians, are in denial.
Tremendous wealth and a way of life that is indifferent, or, to use your word, in denial about how we're engaging natural resources, is leading to death and destruction. And from an anthropological perspective, entire ways of life are just vanishing. Human life, animal life, plant, insects.
You're being asked right now to speak to the world on this issue on climate change. What do you want to say to them?
My heart goes to the young people, my children, my grandchildren, because they're the ones that are going to have to live with what we've done to this planet because of ignorance or, lack of care of creation.
One person might say, well, my asthma is acting up and I resent it. But another one might say, as long as I see smoke coming out of those stacks, I know that my husband has a job. One of the tragic truths about our industrial world is that it has brought us much good, but also much that is not good, that is detrimental to our health, to our planet, to everything that we hold dear.
In my own experience in working and studying the Orthodox Church in North America, I would say that Orthodox Christians have done their part to be climate deniers. And for some reason, they're not seeing or hearing that part in the liturgy that calls them to practice their faith in a way that tempers their consumption patterns, what they eat, thinking about where their food comes from, thinking about who is paying the price and under what condition is the arugula or the kale that we're all so fond of these days. Where is that coming from?
I try to in clergy meetings, but I meet resistance. I've said among my clergy syndesmos, I said, next time we gather, I want us to talk about this from our theological perspectives. I want you to tell me why this is a political problem and not a theological one. And I get pushback. I'm told, no, this will divide the brotherhood. I said, no, I want to address it. I think this is really profoundly problematic.
So to do nothing or to continue at this pace if it's somebody else's problem or, why do I need to worry about this, is to be complicit with a very sad and dark trajectory.
The whole earth and all of its peoples and life has fallen among thieves. It's fallen among the greedy of this world who are exploiting and beating and wounding and on the verge of it being killed. And we have the role before us of being the good traveler, the good Samaritan. How can we say to Christ, yes, I heard that parable, but I'm just going to go across to the other side of the road and keep on about my business? How can we dare say that and show up to church the next Sunday to receive communion?
Up until now, in the Orthodox faith, for me, being raised in Orthodoxy, no one in my church life has ever told me that it's okay to care for the environment, that it's okay to love the earth, that that was what God wanted us to do from the very beginning. And so I feel like that would be something that the clergy could do, that would be of a huge service, something so simple of just implanting that thought. If we are good Christians, if we are good Orthodox, but I don't just want to limit it to Orthodoxy, to anybody who cares, then we would be paying attention to the world around us, and particularly in nature and the balances with it and how to be in balance with it. It doesn't, all of this ideas of you're a political activist or you're just a pagan or all these things, that's just distraction and illusion, and quite frankly feels like something of darkness to me because it's not constructive or useful. And I feel like God is here to have us be useful.
People who don't want to acknowledge the possibility of our culpability, will say this is part of a natural cycle.
It's not just cyclical, because if it was just cyclical, it wouldn't be happening as rapidly as it's happening. It's fact. It's scientific fact. And so I want to do everything I can to open people's eyes to the fact that our climate is changing.
Once again, people want to deny that we caused it. They're like, it's so obvious. And, so the church needs to convince people that this is real and try to get people to change their behavior.
We've forgotten God. You can talk about the ice sheets melting, but that's as distant to us as God is. There's no imminence because we perceive the world through our senses and not through eyes of faith or not through the eyes of the soul or the heart.
The church knows. The church has a lot to say, and they can't sit back and just say it's not our problem. It's not, this is not something the church should get involved in. And like I said, liturgically, that's everything that we should be getting involved in.
Faith leaders have a really strong role. I mean, who would have thought 15 years ago that the head of the Catholic religion would have had an encyclical talking about, the protection of the planet. So I think we are seeing that reformation happening. For someone like me, I think it's happening too slowly because we don't have the time to actually sit and ponder. We need to start acting now, and we need to have those partnerships evolving rapidly, if not yesterday.
In 2007, the bishops gathered and they said that this is the defining issue of our generation. We have got to address climate change. And they said something very interesting, that every generation has a challenge. And the challenge for this generation will be to address climate change.
Well, guess what? We're now dealing with millennials, and millennials actually have a very strong interest in things environmental, but unfortunately many of them believe that Christianity has no interest in that topic whatsoever. So I think that we Orthodox need to say this is part of our platform so to speak, in the secular way, but it's definitely at the heart of our own theological understanding of creation. So we've got to assume the role and find our voice again.
Is the 7th, 8th, and 9th of August in every year. Yeah. Well, the anniversary of my wife's passing is always the 8th of August. And I honestly don't know where it came from. It could have been St. Herman, it could have been God or some messenger talking in my ear, but
The incarnation requires an icon. And the icon continually communicates to us that salvation is achieved through the things of the world, wood and paint and stone and crushing of minerals and the mixing of pigments and the application of human intelligence and human talent.
The union with God in this life takes body and soul as united and puts body and soul on earth in communion with everything around it. And it's part of the ascesis of the human ascent that if we're going to image Christ, if we're going to image God, we're going to do it embodied in the world, and that all of these things around us have the potential for good precisely because they are created by God. It's all iconic of God.
Involve the transformation of material, of simple material things. We don't just have healing services that don't include anointing with oil. We don't have blessing of the grounds of some place or a home or something that doesn't involve holy water. We bring simple bread and wine, and we don't bring wheat and grapes, We bring stuff from nature that we've applied ourselves to, and we've transformed as best we can, and we leave the rest up to God. So we engage with nature, and we ask God to bless our engagement and complete our engagement.
The grace of truth has shone forth upon us, the mysteries darkly prefigured in the times of old.
We hope to build a place that's a true sanctuary for the Orthodox faith, that can support the next generation of young Orthodox. So almost a kind of a small mountain school for the formation of the Orthodox spiritual life.
Through the icon of the incarnate Christ.
A beautiful medieval Byzantine stone chapel built from the local materials, where they can enter into their own being as temple.
This is the safeguard of the Orthodox faith, for if we hold fast to the
where they can be enriched by the hymnography and the liturgies, the liturgical boundaries. And also then to have workshops and gardens where they can where they can create beauty, where they can extend their being out into creation again.
But we shall glory in the icon of the Word made flesh.
I feel that the Church is going to go through many challenges and many tribulations, and maybe God willing, this small place can be a kind of a place set apart for God that can be a sanctuary for Orthodox life.
I went to all the services, did all this stuff, but really did not understand why we did what we did. You know, it didn't make sense. It wasn't obvious. So I went to seminary. It all kind of started making sense. It wasn't, just sitting around and praying, like in a corner. I mean, it was about stuff being part of the church.
It's just obvious. I mean, we're preaching in ways that don't require words. Everything we do is a form is a communication of a message. And that the world is our home. And that it's a destiny, That as, Paul says, all of creation groans for the revelation of the sons of God.
We don't exist without trees. I mean, we're part of that system, and we're not separate from it. And you mess up part of the system, it messes up the whole system.
We've broken a circle that was very efficient in our ecological systems, in which nothing is wasted and everything feeds the next generation, basically.
We're charged with this as early as Genesis. We're supposed to be taken care of and be priests of creation, as one professor would call it, or stewards of creation, as others say. Whatever it is, we're supposed to be taking care of it and not abusing it. It's part of us in a sense.
I kind of get bothered when people mistakenly say, when God said, have dominion over all the earth, that kind of gets taken in a negative way, or like it's mine, I can do what I want. That's not what it means. To me, it means I'm giving you this to care for. It's yours, but you have to care for it.
I think that many of us have absorbed a kind of dominionist kind of understanding and have understood that to be the default setting for Christian thinking. A kind of an understanding that God has made us the lords of creation, and that we can do with it what we will without worrying about the risks, about the consequences of our actions, that it's for us to do what we want. Well, I think that's a profound misunderstanding of Scripture, a misapplication of it, and I think that it has nothing to do with us Orthodox. I think we should be more aware of what we actually believe and counter those dangerous distortions.
The fact that we say, Lord have mercy, is because we've screwed it up so much, and the way we handle it is more often than not wrong. That we don't dominate it. We're not to consume it like we are today and want it like we have today. I mean, it's, you know, the story about the rich man trying to go to heaven, and Christ says, you know, what you got to do is get rid of all, you know, give your money away to the poor. And it's not so much the poor needed it, he's going to go to hell with it.
That's the other thing about the environmental issue is I'm sorry that it's become, if you will, a political football for people to throw around, because it's much more serious than that.
I do think that theology matters, because there's a kind of theology that thinks that, you know, we just dominate, shape, form it according to how we need it, use it. There's even an evangelical form of theology that just thinks that because we're going to have the rapture and the second coming and sort of the millennial rule of Christ, that it doesn't really matter, it's going to destroy your seed. So theology matters.
If we have an apocalyptic understanding whereby God, as some sort of deus ex machina, is going to pluck us out, you know, by terms of rapture or just whatever, if he's just going to appear as the cavalry at the last moment, that's, you know, that's a scary bet that we're placing. And I think it's wrong-headed.
We should not discriminate between our spiritual or sacramental life and our treatment of other people or the planet. It is my conviction that this is a fundamental vocation of all Orthodox Christians.
We don't want to leave them in a state in which things that we have come to appreciate are simply not there for them because we've been poor stewards. And of course, I use the word steward, but in Orthodoxy, environmental issues are not about stewardship in the way that many people understand being sort of caretakers. That is all about redemption for you and for me.
From the very beginning to Adam and Eve, like the very first thing God says to them is, take care of the garden, take care of the animals. It's before the Ten Commandments, before anything. And we haven't been, I haven't been, I've been forgetting.
Food was meant to be communion with God, but we have made it a consumer item. We've made the choices infinite. We like this, we don't like that, but we've lost the connection about how food sustains us, and that's sustenance, even in this world that's just so subject to corruption and sin, still should lead us to give thanks to God. Of course, in paradise, it was the food of communion itself. But in the church, we take that simple food, wine and bread, and water too, and oil, because we anoint with oil, and we drink the water. And it becomes a means of communion with God. It becomes a taste of paradise, a way in which we can see what this world which God made is supposed to be. Paradise.
The Orthodox perspective on the environment really did align with the native perspective on the environment, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. Their story was that the animals came and one day these humans showed up on the shore.
Raven, the leader of the animals, was walking along that very beach the same morning, and he watched the first humans disembark. He walked up to them and surveyed them, not favorably impressed.
When Raven called a meeting with all the animals and he said, look at these creatures. What's going to happen to them? They have no fur on their skin. When winter comes, they're going to die.
Pitiful, pathetic, doomed. Exactly, Raven said. I tried to tell them they can't make it through a winter here.
So they huddled together and came up with this idea.
And they returned to Raven with this proposal by evening. What if we give these pathetic, pitiful, ridiculous new creatures our fur and our feathers for covering? And what if we give them our bodies, our flesh, as meat? Couldn't they survive then?
And each animal was giving them something to help them make it in life.
Raven pondered this suggestion. You know, that just might work. But why would you do that? What's in it for you?
So the natives looked on the animals with respect that it was, the creator, the great creator, was giving themselves to them so they could survive.
And we will give them our flesh, our bodies as meat in exchange for gratitude and respect. And that's the deal, the covenant that the first Alaskan people made with the animals. The animals will give themselves to human beings who know how to treat them with gratitude and respect.
And they had this attitude even from the littlest muskrat to the fish to the whales, that they are providing for us because they want to. It's not that I'm such a great hunter.
A living thing died voluntarily to feed you, to keep you alive. Your duty is to be grateful and humble enough that you would waste none of the gift. Waste nothing.
So, with the feast.
And it blends with the Orthodox teachings of honoring our neighbor, loving our neighbor as ourself. The real person cares for one another. The real person lives in community.
It's the hymn that we sing in our churches throughout the world on Great and Holy Saturday. Let all mortal flesh keep silent in fear and trembling, pondering nothing earthly minded, for the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords comes to be slain, to give himself as food to the faithful. I believe here we have an immediate cultural connection with Alaska Native people, because what they believed about the animals, as it turns out in the Orthodox faith, is also true of God. The pattern is eternal, and we've been acknowledging it for thousands of years. We were just missing that one piece that helps us make total cosmic sense of this pattern. God himself comes to be slain and to offer himself as sacred food to the faithful.
Water for the church is a very central and key component. So anywhere from Genesis 1 all the way through, let's say, Revelation, there's constant mention of water. It's a central component. It is the key component for life. So it's a no-brainer, and it's an easy thing for us as church to take up and say, this is a social issue we have to work on and we have to deal with. I've been working at the United Nations on the human right to water and sanitation, which we're dealing with drinking water and getting people water. And that includes for agriculture and matters like that. So it's not just tap in your homes. Even to grow food, even plants, humans, animals, everything that lives needs water. So if you can control water, you essentially can control 70 to 80% of the human person. I've equated it to kind of whimsically to human trafficking. If you can own water, you can own the person, right? You own.
Never thought of that. That's incredible.
Yeah,
you do. You own water, you own the person.
Exactly. So for us, the human right to water and sanitation means a complete ring fencing from public sector participation. Not in the sense of getting contracts to build infrastructure, but for that delivery of water to the homes and the ownership of all water resources, it has to remain in the public hands. If the public doesn't own it, then somebody is owning the public, and we can't have that. And so that's sort of the very base level of why we got involved in water and sanitation and why it's becoming much more of a serious issue globally.
I was going to mention fracking.
Yeah, it's a huge, I mean, this is why the NGO Mining Working Group got involved in water, is because of the fracking. And the fracking is just completely destroying aquifers, nice fresh water, and just blowing them up into, I mean, it'll either blow it up to where it's getting mixed with brackish water, or the chemicals from the process of doing fracking are getting into this water, making it completely unpotable. So we're seeing the destruction of these, and also on the other side we're seeing the ability to access some of them. So there's a lot going on now that we need to address on the policy level to ensure that these are kept safe for people to access and to drink in the future. So the church, I mean, in any realm, it's a matter of that, we're part of creation. We are tasked with taking care of creation, including humans and all of creation. But for us, it's a matter of living the gospel, living and being church, which is witnessing Christ's love in the world. And so if you're looking at something like water or creation, there's really no question about it. If we're going to live church, if we're going to live the church, if we're going to be church, then we have to make sure that these very essential components of life are there. I mean, there are plenty of things we can live without, but something like water is not something we can live without.
May I ask you a personal question? When did you give me a moment where you saw the beauty of God in creation?
Well, Father, I would have to say there are two times for that.
Please.
One was when I was very young, and my father took me fishing for the first time. And I knew I didn't make the fish, my dad didn't make the fish, God made the fish. And all this beauty around me, and it did amaze me. And I kind of from that point on, I wanted to go fishing and hunting, not because I cared whether or not I got anything, which kind of bothered my dad because I was supposed to be more serious about it, but because it gave me a chance to get out in the natural environment. But the second time was when I came to Alaska. And as I went around the state in my role as first as the administrator and then as the bishop, and every time somebody would take me somewhere new, I would stand there and say, oh, this has to be the most beautiful.
Church that is so beautiful, and we've taken all this time to paint the icons and erect the building and do all these things. Why on earth would we treat it poorly? This is a place of worship where we come, and it's the exact same for our planet. Our planet gives us so much. God created that for us.
Yeah.
Why would we not take care of it?
Yeah.
I believe it was St. Basil the Great of the 4th century said that the creation is a supreme icon of God, and by contemplating it, we may draw close to God, to know God. But now, if we take that image seriously, an icon is meant to be not just an image, but also a window, perhaps even a doorway through which, beholding the image, we contemplate what it represents. We contemplate the source. And in the case of this, I would say even demonic zeitgeist or mind of the times based in greed, we are painting over the earth with the fruits of that greed. We are actively pulling out of it the things that are essential for life to exist. And in the process, we are defacing that icon of the face of God. And in doing so, we're not only making it ugly, we are reducing its ability to be an icon. Because I believe that there's even some profoundly deep evil that eventually wants to say, see, look, it was never holy. It was never fully integrated and so magnificently interdependent that it was beyond understanding. We're going to just wipe away all of that, and it's all just here for us to use for our own pleasure, our own distraction, our own entertainment.
The different world that we see in our screen actually isn't just a world that we don't live in rural Alaska, for instance. But I think for so many of those folks, they don't live there either. It's a world that they project. It's a brief seconds of what we wish it was, or they wish it were. And it's not actually their real lives either. The amount of energy and time people invest in buying the right lighting and getting the right outfit for one post, so hopefully someone will like them. All that energy invested in that, fleeting, and it's an illusion. It's not a real thing. That person's time spent with someone else would have improved their day immediately.
I've never felt more disconnected from my family than when I got an iPhone. And when everything is so convenient and right there, right? I can do all my work, I can control different things in the house, but I'm looking at this and not at my children. And I would love to have more time to be with them and to pray and to enjoy what is around me that's beautiful.
This is why it's important to have a strong domestic church where the family prays together in the morning and in the evening, and where they have dinner together with the television off and the cell phones put away. That there be a certain place in the house where those cell phones, including mom and dad, place their cell phones. They turn them off and they put it in a basket.
You let go of these certain things,
yeah,
and slowly start to change your way of life,
yeah,
and inspire the people around you.
Right.
It's important, to walk the walk and not just do the talk. And I think each generation has a responsibility in their own time in how it is that they contribute to the society and the environment that's around them. This is our time for these kinds of initiatives.
Unless you educate the people so they understand what is the current situation and what could develop in the future, you're not going to get the help. The thing you don't want is people 10, 20 years from now saying, I wish I knew. Had I known, I would have done something. We don't want that to be an excuse.
I think that one of the problems I think that happens is that people feel like the problem is so enormous that they don't need to do anything. Because what can I do as one person? But I believe that we can do the best we can to protect to be ecologically conscious in our own homes.
So people will say, well, this is expensive. Well, it's not nearly as expensive as it's going to be if we stay on the path that we're on now and we find ourselves in an absolutely devastated state because we have not been responding to what, in fact, the earth is telling us.
One of my goals early on was that I want to image the proper relationship with our community and the environment. So when people come up here, I wanted them to see our organic gardens. We have 2 very large organic gardens, and we grow only heirloom vegetables, which means we have our own seeds. So we don't care about these big seed companies and they're tweaking the seeds so that they can't produce their own seeds and you got to keep buying from them. We have our own, and our vegetables are a lot better than theirs. They taste better because they're natural. We have solar panels now, so that we aren't just sucking in the energy from out there, some of it coming from coal, but we are actually contributing energy and getting paid for it. But you know, I'm a proponent of simple living. In other words, we don't have to have everything.
We're going to have to shift back to a worldview that realizes the things that aren't in limited supply. Resilience, love, the ability to work together. These are the things that it'll take to do that. But it won't be without a lot of sacrifices and a lot of changes to what we've grown accustomed to or been told are the needed things.
With the words of the liturgy in my mind, I have to try to limit my participation in the systems of destruction that are just built into our everyday lives.
St. Basil said, the human heart is always like, it's got a hand, it's reaching out and pulling stuff into it all the time. It wants not just experience, but things and people and feelings. And it's so jam-packed in there. I suppose this is why Prophet Jeremiah said the heart is deceptive and deceitful beyond everything else. Who can know it? So to deny ourselves, to pick up our cross, is to begin to empty all that out. If we don't deny ourselves the way Christ said, again, not to kind of beat ourselves up, but to make room for the Holy Spirit within us.
There is certainly a teaching of only take what you need. We don't overharvest. When it is time, when we know what we've been blessed with is enough.
And we're so used to living in a certain way, but if we slow down and have a life that actually could be very sweet and do away with a lot of the luxuries that we've been given on the back of all these things that have been causing climate change, we can have a really sweet life and actually more family life and more time for prayer.
Many of the elders among the indigenous Orthodox communities in remote Alaska said the same thing, actually. They said, when we were younger, life was harder, but more satisfying.
Right.
Now, life is easier and less fulfilling.
It's really easy to lose hope and to be challenged with these expectations we think there are on us, but we don't have to be. We can choose to live authentically and person to person and locally and simply as we want. It's a completely valid way of life.
But I think that it all goes back to the same source, and it's the humility that it takes to reframe your understanding of yourself and the world and God, where you're not at the center.
Because that's really the great lesson we have to learn. We have to be disabused of this lie that it's profoundly prevalent in America, the United States of America. This individualism is poison. And to the extent that we can apprehend and then live into an awareness of how everything matters, everything I do or say or think has an effect. Once we get there, there's some hope.
Infants only care about themselves. Babies only care about what I want, what I like, what I need now, immediately. But that's viewed as an infantile behavior appropriate for children. To become a man means to voluntarily become the servant of something more important than me. To voluntarily offer one's life to something more important than my desires, my wishes, or my comfort.
Everything is sacred. How dare I mindlessly, thoughtlessly use and throw it away? How dare I accept the definition of consumer? We have to radically challenge all of these assumptions and all of this, dare I say, the commands of the world to just conform, just go along. That's the only way you'll get along, you know, in that old expression. Through the mind of this world, hope is misunderstood. And I think if we're asking the question, is there hope that beyond our current crisis, is there hope that life will continue and recover? I believe absolutely, because I believe in God's firm commitment to that continuing.
You know, most pastors realize that people don't like to change. So they get set in their ways and they don't want to, take on initiatives that might create a lot of effort.
How can we make choices in our lives? What kinds of things can we do as citizens of this country, as human beings, to change that system? What kinds of things can we do?
I feel like the first thing we have to do as fellow Christians is immediately form discussion groups that can lead to dynamic action. There has to be a radical critique and a radical rebellion and objection to it. We just don't easily change our minds about that. It takes ascesis. It takes really concentrated hard work to re-change our whole orientation.
So in a way we have what I call the adaptive advantage. We know what's going to happen and we can plan for how to handle it while we reduce our emissions as fast as we can. There are lots of different ways to reduce our emissions. It involves changing from using fossil fuels or saving fossil fuels for really important purposes that we simply cannot fuel with renewable energies. So wind turbines, solar, geothermal, other kinds of renewable energy. I'm very optimistic about human innovation, human ingenuity. We're an extraordinary species, and so long as we can live up to our potential, we will bend that curve. We must take heart and we must look for the benefits and the opportunities that can come from devising solutions. But the solutions have to be collaborative. We have to listen to each other, and we really have to get better at listening to each other's values and courageously breaking down silos and barriers so that we can work together. It's not us and them. There's no us and them here. We all live on this planet. We all can work together to find these solutions.
I work at a seminary where I often bring in Buddhist and Muslim and Christian scholars and Jewish scholars all together. And the one thing that happens is we can talk about how we're different at a table easily. But when we talk about environment, we actually all agree. This is a time when we need to join forces with others to try to push this understanding of what global climate change is about. I think if people really understood the problem, they would act.
You're not born alone and you don't die alone. You're a member of the community from the moment you're born, and you're a part of that community even after your death.
You can't be saved alone. You can't look out for yourself alone. You can't go to church because it benefits you. You can't have a rule of prayer because it benefits you. You have to see yourself framed in the light of God's presence in the cosmos, that you're not alone, but that you're a part of a beautiful community of holiness that exists in Him.
Worship is something we have to do corporately, that our commitment to that only is going to have real teeth and substance if we can co-inspire one another and commit to do it together.
So I would say that priests need to preach that, the importance of us all being in this together. It's not about you taking your kids and driving off somewhere. It's about you and the senior members of your family and your community and your church parish, of being involved with each other and including each other. It's about reclaiming the village. And that can even be done in cities by networking within the community.
There's a world-centered consciousness that's, survival of the fittest sort of understanding, where it's all about survival. But the deep logic of survival in the sense of salvation is, I'll only survive if I'm more concerned about you than I am about me.
We enter into the sanctity of creation through the liturgical act.
Yeah.
That it's already a sanctified, God-revealing world.
Mm-hmm.
That in our liturgical expression allows us to enter into that present reality.
Yeah. And actually see reality for what it really is. I would go that far, not that it becomes, but it really is here and now, now and ever, not ever, later, ages to ages, but it's now and ever. And, and if you don't see it now, you may not.
how to respond to it, and then use the base to educate, to actually bring experts, I hate to use that word, but people who are involved in this, to come and speak to the parish, to engage around particular issues that are local. Invariably, they also tend to be global, to kind of stop the indifference, or it's somebody else's problem, or it doesn't affect me. That's just false. That's not accurate.
We have amazing champions around the world who act as voices for other species, but there's a huge struggle to really have that voice at the table, because inherently trying to protect species tends to interrupt economic activity.
If the time ever comes when those villages are no longer economically viable, and we hear rumblings about that, you know, why don't we just close the high schools and move all the children, all the high school kids into more centralized hub communities? But uprooting them means that there's no longer anyone where they've lived for thousands of years to speak up for the land when the time comes. If the traditional tribal people are there and there's a threat, the gold and copper mine, for example, in Southwest Alaska.
There's a gold mine that's projected to being pushed forward to happen, and this is the Kuskokwim River here.
Well, but the people say, but not in my backyard. We've been here 10,000 years, and you just can't do that without any consultation, by disrupting and destroying our culture and our way of life.
They promised that they would provide and take care of the care of that chemical lake, but for how long? You know, that promise doesn't last.
But if they're not there, the land has no voice. Our people are the voice of the land. The land needs the people now as much as the people need the land.
Biodiversity is not at the table because biodiversity doesn't have a voice. Not a voice that humans sit down at a table with.
What is biodiversity?
So biodiversity is the myriad kaleidoscope of species with which we share this planet. We don't sit down at the table with trees and wolves and insects and amphibians until we get better and better at ways to represent the value of keeping species intact, and really get creative about how we see those benefits, which may require us to halt some levels of economic activity or be much more strategic with it.
One thing that brings me confidence, or hope maybe, is that we've persisted on these lands, and we've survived as people, a unique culture, a unique language, and by sticking together in community and doing the work that it takes at the local level, we'll survive for another 12,000 years on our land.
In Alaska, we can feel so isolated and feel like such a small people, but we realize that we connect with all these indigenous people who share these same struggles. We had the sacred fire, and that's something that was put into all of us, this fire of resistance and of healing. It guides us through these days, and it feels like it's just getting so dark. But we were able to have this fire and share it with each other and light a way out of this darkness that we had been forced to be accustomed to. Yeah. And now we know that we have the power to resist that, and that we can reroot ourselves. Yeah. Because our roots have never been cut off. Maybe a lot of us up top have been cut off, but our roots still remain, and we're growing back from that.
Yeah. Right on. I am overjoyed to hear that. and may it continue to grow in new shoots and new things. I mean that so sincerely. My heart, my prayers, and my support just so with that Indigenous rising and coming into who you are. I feel that this world now, more than ever before, needs that voice.
Oppressors and those who have been able to dominate these lands and these peoples have been writing the history, and a lot of has been left out, and we're able to fill in those blanks now.
Yeah, exactly, and start a new future. The time has come and has already come, and we're already starting now, but lots of work needs to be done to do this. But the time has come for the oppressors and the colonizers who hold power and courts for their voice to just fade. We don't need them anymore. We need other voices. We need the voice of the land. We need the voice of the heart. Christ says, "Who was first will be last, and who was last will be first." So the white man came, the colonization happened, and there was nothing more awful and horrible that could happen to any people on earth as what happened. But that time has passed, and it's time now for a new beginning.
When did you fall in love with nature?
I don't know. I think I'm falling in love with nature. You know, I mean, I'm surprised every day now by something I hadn't seen before. I mean, I walk around the neighborhood I've lived in for 8 years, and I didn't notice those flowers, and I didn't notice that tree, and I didn't notice those birds.
I know growing up in both urban areas and suburban areas that sometimes it was just the simple act of being able to stand under a tree for shade in a hot city, or maybe it was just having the experience of seeing house sparrows singing in the morning and watching them warm up to get ready for the day, or maybe it's simply having the joy of seeing something blooming between the cracks in a sidewalk. For others, it's a more profound experience in regards to going into the wilderness and losing yourself there and reconnecting
to nature or can't get out to the wilderness.
Someone in the city shouldn't think that there's a separation. Life is flowing. It has a source. It's coming from God, and it's coming through nature to us. And so someone in the city, even though they're not able to get to a place like this, should at least know that it exists. And in the cities of old, there were still, for the urban people, still real opportunities to go on pilgrimages, to go out and refresh your soul in nature. And so they have not forgotten that the city has this relationship with the wilderness.
It's not simply a kind of superstition or a mythic belief. It's something real that our people live with. And therefore you live in a, I would say, in a constant state of respect and gratitude.
And we should see the face of Christ as you say, the face of Christ, the face of God in everything, His presence in everything.
It's how God dresses, it's how God expresses. And so we learn to see God in all things and in each other because of nature. And you too, therefore, are part of nature. And there is no separation. There is no division. There's many, many ways in which life is corrupted and altered and broken and fragmented and forgotten. But no matter where we are, we have life in us. And we can find our way to that truth.
I've never done anything like this before, and this is all new to me. I've only just been a priest and an author, but the opportunity to be out here and talk to other Orthodox priests is just too much of a blessing for my heart to even understand.